Meditation and Spiritual Life, Swami Yatiswarananda. Chapter 12, The Problem of Sex in Spiritual Life. The influence of sex on life. Sex is an important problem in spiritual life. Every aspirant must come to grips with it one day or other in his life. As some of the modern psychologists have pointed out, sex plays an important part in an average man's life and absorbs a lot of his thinking, feeling, and willing. Those who want to lead an intense spiritual life should first of all reduce this dominance of sex in their lives. Those who have led a pure life from an early age will find the problem easier, but the modern young man turns to spiritual life after collecting lots of impure thoughts. He generally holds a huge jungle to clear before he can successfully take up spiritual life. The chief difficulty about sex is that it exists at various levels of personality. Sex is not all physical. Apart from the physiological urges, sex exists in the mental planes as subtle attractions or fascinations. It is like an iceberg, just the tip of which is seen outside. The more introspective an aspirant becomes, the more he understands the subtle ramifications of sex within him. Very often, this frightens people. Few people can face the great challenge that the control of sex offers. But unless one fully meets it, there can be no true spiritual life. One needs tremendous grit and iron will for this. If an ordinary man gets a peep into the mind of a true spiritual aspirant, he will be frightened away. It is like the interior of a blast furnace where pure metal is being constantly separated from the ore. Celibacy and marriage, the first thing that a spiritual aspirant must decide is whether to remain a celibate or to marry. Hinduism does not look upon married life as bad, but it definitely imposes certain restrictions on it. But on the celibate, its rules are pretty hard. Those who want to lead an exclusively spiritual life will find lifelong celibacy an absolute necessity. Christ said, "There are some eunuchs which were born so from their mother's womb. There are some eunuchs which were made eunuchs of men, and there are eunuchs which have made themselves eunuchs for the kingdom of heaven's sake. He that is able to receive it, let him receive it." This was the passage Sri Ramakrishna told two boys, Sharat and Shashi, who were later known as Swami Sharadananda and Swami Ramakrishnananda, to read when they first went to see him. He remarked that marriage was the root of all bondage. All great prophets have been unanimous about this fact. While worldly people are always so anxious to do something for God's creation, as if God needed their help. All this is hypocrisy and cant. God does not need anybody to help him in his creation. Neither do these people really care. What they want is their enjoyment, not God's creation. In one of his famous letters, Saint Paul wrote, "I say, therefore, to the unmarried and widows, it is good for them if they abide even as I. But if they cannot contain, let them marry, for it is better to marry than to burn." This is a very salutary advice. We do not say that everyone must become a monk. That depends on the stage of evolution one has reached. It is better to become a householder than to become a monk who breaks his great vows. Outward renunciation must always be followed by inner renunciation. Otherwise, it has no value. The monk must have both. Only outward renunciation won't do. For those who cannot renounce inwardly because of the weaknesses and who keep themselves busy with worldly ideas, hopes, and thoughts, it is better to follow the householder's life and not be hypocrites. A man who really renounces inwardly can also live in the world and yet fulfill the conditions of absolute brahmacharya, all ethical conditions, and lead a sexually pure life, a life of non-violence, non-hatred, and non-attachment without fettering himself to any other human being through personal relationship. But this is very difficult and quite impossible for many people without preliminary spiritual training and long years of spiritual practice. Let them at least know that such a life is possible, though it is rare and for most people quite difficult. Those who want to become monks or remain celibates throughout life must be extra careful. Do you know the story of the monk who was ruined by a rat? So there was a monk who was continually disturbed in his meditation by a rat. So some kind people gave him a cat to catch the rat. Naturally, the poor monk had to feed the cat with milk, and as it was rather difficult for him to get milk always, he decided to get a cow. The cow had to be fed. So people suggested to him, why not buy a field? Finding this advice very reasonable, he bought a field, but after a short time, he found that the field had to be tilled, and this meant quite a lot of work, which he could not do alone. So he married, and that was the end of his monkhood. This presents allegorically what generally happens in human life. One desire just breeds another till in the end they become innumerable and can no longer be controlled.